Good evening. If I can draw your attention for a minute, I'd like to get the meeting started. It's 5:30. I do anticipate we'll have people straggling in, but we've got a lot planned for tonight, and so I want to make sure that there's enough time for us to get through the work that we're looking for. Thank you, Susan. So first, I just want to welcome you. I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I know it's important to each of you, and that's why you made the special effort to get out here. And I think it's really important for the decision makers, the council, to hear from you and to be able to provide this format. I want to start by just introducing some folks around the room. They'll be helping to facilitate the meeting tonight and working with you. And I'll explain more about what specifically we're going to do. But if I can just start with Susan Deal McCarthy in the back of the room, raising her hand. She is our wrangler for tonight, so she's going to be helping us with timing and other issues. If Susan's talking to you, that means you needed to be wrangled. We've got Jennifer Dart, Deputy Director for the Community Development Department, and she'll be facilitating this table over here, and we'll get into more detail what that is. Joe Mateer, our Senior Planner, is working at this table. And a third workstation, again, I'll get into more detail what these are up here. Myself and Willa Darley Chapin will be, our community development specialist will be helping up here, and we'll be moving around quite a bit. Dave Moon from Colerain Capital has made the trip up to help explain differences in the project that you'll be looking at tonight and working through with us. We also have Juan, who's doing the audio-visual officially for the city. He'll be posting the audio-visual to our website as soon as it's processed. He's estimating by week's end, potentially. Did I just give you a false deadline? Okay, week's end. And this information will then be, available for posterity. You can review it in the future. I will say, be portions of this meeting that won't be recorded per se, because we're going to have some working groups, and so there's not a good way to get audio-visual on that. But there will be report outs, and this portion of the meeting will be videoed. So I just kind of wanted to give you a broad overview of what I'm hoping to accomplish tonight with you all. And again, thank you for coming out. I'll start by talking a little bit about how we got here. I'll work through what the activities are going to be tonight. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dave to talk about what the project changes were and sort of what we're going to be looking at tonight. And then getting into the specific work that we'll be doing. There are going to be 3 stations, which again I'll explain in a little bit more detail in a moment, and then a couple of self-guided stations that folks can work at as well. What I'm going to be asking for you to do is to select into roughly equal groups into those different workstations. Folks who don't want to participate in that way are welcome to work independently, and we have a couple of items around the room that I'd like to point to for that work. So up here in this first workstation, there's going to be a deeper dive presentation on what the changes are. This will be an area where you can ask staff to and or the applicant, Dave, to tell you a little bit more about the things that you're concerned about. And so that'll be this workstation. The next station over is what we're calling a housing mix workstation, where the idea is to talk about specifically the change. Now, you've all probably seen the email that I sent out. This project now has a mix of open market and student housing. So we've been working through an activity at that table. And then this table is reserved for neighborhood compatibility. The facilitators will describe to you in a little more detail what the specific activity that you'll be doing at these tables is when you get to those working groups. But the one thing that I want to emphasize is that we're trying to do a lot of work in a very little amount of time. We're trying to make sure that everybody has their opinion heard at the table, and that we're recording those ideas and trying to relay those to the council. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to take your information and give it to the decision makers before they make their decision. In that vein, we have at each working station some guidelines, and I won't read them to you, but the one that I want to really emphasize is that if you're the kind of person who likes to speak, please be cognizant of that and listen. And if you're the kind of person who likes to sit back and listen, we're going to try and make sure that you have a forum for making your words known too. So we'll be working in a respectful manner, regardless of your opinions, to try and get all of these ideas down on the table. So those are the 3 working stations. Now we have independent stations, and I just want to give you a little bit of a lead into where those stations are. On this side, we have a map of the traffic circulation. Susan's going to be available to go into detail with you. Have specific questions about this workstation, but the idea here is to outline what is existing networks, what are proposed networks, and what some of the mitigations or some of the project changes are, and it goes into a little bit of detail about the traffic study. One of the things we'd like folks to do here if they're working independently is if you know of an area that's already dangerous, or you know of an area that you're concerned is going to become dangerous, and you have an idea for how to improve that area, you put a little arrow onto a post-it, write your idea on it, and then put the post-it next to that intersection, let's say. So if you wanted a roundabout at Elk Wood and St. Louis, you put roundabout here please with an arrow, stick it there. Now you don't all have to put roundabout here please. If there's already a roundabout there and you like that idea, you can come and check on it. That'll be the activity that's working here. We have scattered around the room plan sets. Dave's going to walk you through both the site plan and the elevations of the buildings, but they're scattered around the room here so that small groups, if you want to work independently, can go and look and get more detail about what those look like. We have a couple of other opportunities for taking ideas that don't fit within this framework that we're trying to establish in the meeting tonight to make sure that we capture those and communicate them to the City Council. The facilitators will be taking ideas that fall into that category, and they'll be putting them into the virtual blue box, so they'll be keeping those off to the side, not necessarily recording them onto the main worksheets that we'll be working on, but they'll be retaining that information. We'll be communicating that to the City Council. And then there's an independent workstation if you have ideas that you know are outside of these frameworks, a literal blue box at the back of the room here. It's kind of a suggestion box that you can write down ideas and put them in there, and we'll get those back. Recognize that this meeting is during a time when people, some people take dinner. We do have a couple of snacks on the back there, so please partake. And I think with that, after the workstations, we're going to have a report out. So each of the facilitators will take the broad themes and ideas that came out of those working groups and relay them to the group so that you can hear what the other groups thought that you weren't involved in and see if there were broad patterns. And then at the very end, we'll sort of have a wrap up and spend a little bit of time taking questions, and we'll end by 7:30. So are there any questions about the broad format that we're discussing using here tonight? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to give us a rundown on what the project is. Then I'm just going to regroup, super quick recap on the working groups and have you sort into those working groups, and we'll get started.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate everybody coming this evening and showing the interest that you are by being here, and also I'll thank all of those people in particular that have been attended the over 20 plus public hearings that we've had to date. So I'm not going to go into too much, or I won't go into any information about the history of this project, but suffice to say, and particularly again for those of you that have been here for all these umpteen hearings, you know that there's been quite a transition during this whole what we call entitlement process, but this public review process. This started out to be 4 buildings, all in what we call the E-urban shape that you see on the right there on the west side of the property. Initially all 4 stories, so we had 4 buildings, all student purpose. And so there's, and it was more of a modern design when we started, and now we've transitioned through actually the 17 Planning Commission meeting process to the farmhouse style, which was the favored elevation of the Planning Commission. But then when we got to City Council, what became very clear, and particularly through to the last City Council meeting that we had back last August, was that regardless of the need for student housing and purpose-built student housing, which we believe there's a dire need, and that's kind of, we were initially very passionate about addressing that need. There's a need for other types of housing within this community as well. And In response to all of the input that we received at these various public hearings and the independent input that the city council members received, they ultimately said, you know what, we believe this should be a housing project on this site. We believe that we should change the zoning on this site for high density zoning or higher density zoning. This is actually medium density. But we don't feel that everybody is accommodated, all the needs, and no one project can ever satisfy all housing needs, obviously, but they ultimately, at least two of the council members, said they just couldn't support this project moving forward in as it was restricted to students only. So over the last 3 months, we've gone back with our tails between our legs and tried to figure out how we could come up with a project that worked economically and that we felt that we could manage and that would ultimately be an asset to this community. So what we're going to be proposing the council members consider next Wednesday is the project that we're going to be talking about tonight, and specifically the changes that we've made. On the right side there, on the so this will now be basically half community apartments or open market apartments. So those 3 buildings you see on the left that were formerly student housing will all be open housing. So we'll have studios and 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms plus den available to anybody. So anybody in the community, whether that's faculty, staff of the university, or anybody. So that side of the project, the west side of the project, will all be now open market housing. And then the right side will be student specific. So we started with 800 beds of student housing. In this current configuration, we're now down to 423 beds, I think it is, of student. And then, so that's 240 units total in the project. 125 of those units would be on the market side, and 150 of those units would be on the student side. These buildings in the configuration that we're going to propose to council next week are 4 stories. These L-shaped or reversed L-shaped buildings are 3 stories, and then this building here is 2 stories. We've also added amenities that aren't, that are more suitable for families. On the community apartment side, we've got, in this configuration, we've got a children's play area. We have bocce ball. I think we have, I'm not sure, we've got barbecue areas, but in any event, not student specific. Whereas on the and the outdoor facilities actually are going to be available to everybody. So everything on the exterior of the buildings, those amenities will all be available to anybody that lives in the community. Within the buildings themselves, in this area here on the community side, we'll have a fitness center, a business center, what we call an internet cafe, which is like a community room, and then laundry facilities. And then on the student side, we'll have some of the amenities that some of you may be familiar from our prior hearings that will include study rooms and computer labs and the student-specific amenities. But the big change, we've added some parking, by the way. I think we were 409 spaces previously, and we're showing 449 spaces now. The amenity space on the total project went from 7,225 square feet. Now it's 11,285 square feet. But that's essentially it. I mean, the biggest change, again, is... Beg your pardon? 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm done. Anyway, the biggest change is that this is now more of what, Susan Ornelas would tell me more than once, that she didn't feel this was an apt name for the project, Village, because it was somewhat restrictive in that it was designed specifically for students. Well, now it's I'm proud to say it's a village. It's We do have student-specific housing because we strongly believe and know, frankly, that that's needed. But we also have, half of the project now is going to be occupied by buildings that accommodate anybody in the community that needs housing, and certainly there's a lot of need for housing. So that's, those are the primary differences, happy to answer questions at the appropriate time this evening. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm going to ask you in just a moment to break into groups. I did a head count, and I think we're about 33, so we'll be looking at about 11 per table. And again, if you want to break off and do independent work, you're more than welcome to. So just to clarify what's going to be happening at each workstation, and that everyone will get the chance to work at each workstation because there'll be 3 rotations. At this front station, you'll be able to ask me about longhorns. This is your captain speaking. It's definitely this. Excuse me.
Better get a smack.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. This workstation will be able to ask me about process questions or Dave about the project questions. And what you'll be doing at this workstation is using the Post-its to write down issues. And so, for example, if traffic was a concern of yours in the first iteration, you may write down traffic at LK Wood and Sunset, for example, on here. And we've got 2 columns that this new project works to address this concern, or I still have these concerns. And you'll be placing your Post-its with the issue identified on one of those 2 columns. Will is going to be helping to organize those, and as we start to see broad themes, we'll label them, and then you can self-select those into the categories. So this is deeper dive on the project and more information about how you feel about the project at that point. This table and this table, they're both going to have the same format, where the intent is to try and work together to come up with the process that we would envision for affecting the change that we see for each of these topics. And so what I mean by that is, here we're dealing with housing mix. The project has a completely different mix of housing types now in this current iteration. We'll be looking at the current condition, what the proposed future condition is that the group will work to define, and then what are the steps that we need to get there. That's the same process for both of these tables. This one focused on the housing mix. This one focused on the neighborhood compatibility, design issues, the flow of the project, whatever comes to mind that's related to how you feel about how this project intersects with the neighborhood. Again, we have an independent process over here where you can look at the circulation, and we have the comments box in the back, the blue box in the back, to put comments that don't fit within this framework that you want to make sure that the council understands. So please take a moment to break into workstations, approximately 11 each, and we'll get going. Thank you. In the agenda modification, I'm going to start over here with the housing mix. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give Jen the mic. She's going to go through the broad patterns and themes that she's seeing. I'll do the same thing at this table, and then once again up here, I'll tell you about the next steps, and then we'll have time for open question and answer. We'll close early, and then we'll all stick around in case you want to ask more questions.
Okay, so ours is a housing mix, and some of the current situation that was brought up was poor housing conditions, mold, dilapidated, not enough housing stock, no return of deposits, racial equity and discrimination, large rate of student houselessness in HSU, and lack of affordable housing in Arcata in general, lack of housing for pet owners, and there was poor mix. The 52%, 48% statistic is horribly misstated. 423 beds are for students, 228 non-students for open. So those are the current situation. For the desired future, the themes that came out were affordability, I think was one of the top themes was, is there an opportunity for low-income units or the opportunity for Section 8 or tenant-based rental assistance, or would the project accept that? The other thing that kind of came out was separating the students in the community housing, so there was noise concerns. Quiet area zones was one of the things that was brought up. Is there an option for that? And then I think, yeah, unit pricing, diversity. So how would you manage, I guess there's a concern about how you would manage the community section to make sure that it's not all just students. So that was something else that came up in the desired future. And limiting certain units only to families to kind of prevent that. So that was one of the things that came up in the desired future. And then actions needed. How do we define student? So is it a grad student? What's the age? What's the family needs? Are CR students included? How do you define students? That was one of the actions needed. And then make student housing only available to non-freshmen was one of the things that was suggested as well. And then who's responsible? So as far as the low-income housing section, somebody mentioned DHHS, Arcata House, Public Housing Authority, working with those different entities. And then another question was who's responsible for security and management? Is HSU still going to be involved, or is this going to be privately managed? And then somebody said development will enhance the area. So those were kind of the themes for our table. Joe, you want to go next?
Yes, we had the neighborhood compatibility table, and I can tell you that first group we had was really lights out on that one. Kind of was a little more difficult to wrangle people to kind of focus, but we did have a lot of, in the first group, people were very, they did consolidate their opinions together and come up with some ideas. Generally, the current situation, they decided that they look at the current proposal that's before them tonight as kind of the existing conditions. And there was some concern about the height of the building being too large, again, too many people. We had various ones, you know, there was counterpoints of like, you know, maybe it should be all student housing and lessen some of the impact of the existing residential neighborhoods that we have in our community. So we did have some diverse opinions on that. One of the comments that came out was that it was kind of a seasonal housing, that if the students were there during the school year, they would often leave and kind of be high impact in part of the year and then off doing their other things in the summer months. And that the type of housing, the way it was structured, with the amenities inside, the bocce ball, the tot lot and stuff like that, it would almost make people not want to leave that. It's almost like that high-end resort you go to in Cancun and, you know, don't even leave and see the community. So they felt that that some of those amenities might increase the cost of the housing structures, but then it would not allow the residents to actually communicate and see and visit the outside areas, the other parts of the community. Let's see, the height, there were some comments about the mix again, about they thought the mix wasn't a good representation of it, and one was using beds and then just the number of units. So they weren't sure how many would actually be kind of non-students, or if any of them were going to be non-students in the open market area. The desired outcomes, some of them had compatibility with the lack of transportation and lighting, safe access to and around the area, even in the neighborhoods to the off-site destinations. So any residents there, if they wanted to go to Westwood Market going through that neighborhood to the west, lacking sidewalks along LK Wood, or even lighting and stuff like that, that would be good to have a desired outcome of better lighting, safe access for those people going to those destinations. One concern was that the house parties in the neighborhoods would increase, surrounding neighborhoods. If there was that high density of students there, they might find their friends or find house parties in the other traditional single-family residential neighborhoods. And so there's concern about that. And that kind of followed up with some of the policing and who would oversee that. Were the on-site security people, or was it the Arcata Police Department, or the responsibility of the UPD, or some sort of arrangement like that. So that was kind of put into the who's responsible. We'll see how that plays out. Parking, again, that's a love-hate relationship, and we had a lot of people say that there was too much parking and that it should be, people who use parking should pay for it, and people who don't use parking shouldn't pay for it. Some people indicated that there wasn't enough parking, that it was impacting their immediate neighborhoods because of the lack of parking. So that was, again, one of those balanced ones between the different needs there. Affordable housing, that was a really desired future of affordable housing. They kind of wondered how it would be quantified as far as what is affordable and is it truly affordable. Is there anything I missed, folks? I don't want to misrepresent.
Restorative justice?
Restorative justice, in kind of the policing actions, that we put that one in for the action needed. And the idea would be for the students or anybody really, the situation maybe between the interaction between the police and the community members at large. Did that capture it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Just the size of the project was a major neighborhood compatibility issue we talked about. It's larger than the last version.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think bringing that up, I think they were somewhat. I felt like some people were almost offended by the, taller buildings, and it was almost a larger project, more parking and stuff from what they'd seen in the past.
Have the story poles increase in height with the increase in height of the project?
We did have, that question came up, and I did not know the answer to that to see if the story poles represent the current proposal.
No, we haven't discussed that with the city yet.
So they have been changed from what the original story poles were. I'll pass this over on to the director.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the front here because a lot of the themes that came up on the tables are also reflected here. I'll just hit real quickly on the topics. Traffic, parking, size, affordability, amenities, and that amenities reflects what Joe had said about concern that the amenities would increase the cost of the development. Safety, there was one comment on energy, and then community inclusivity was a concern. And that's all of those comments are over on the I still have these concerns side. There were a couple of issues that came up as works to address the concern. One commenter identified the non-student housing, and then the others have ecologically compliant, environmentally conscious, mixed units with family units, on-site management and security, and the bike accommodations. And then we had one question that was posted as to what the solar, water, and electric amenities were. And I'll let Dave address that. Before I hand over the mic, though, I've still got it. I'd like to just kind of focus on the work that you all did independently on this, and thank you, Toby, for helping me. Yes, please.
I'm guessing it's fine. So there were some concerns, two, that traffic was going to be directed from this development down to the JUI Street roundabout, Foster Avenue. It isn't. Still, nothing has really changed as far as what the initial project description was, as far as traffic related improvements, safety improvements, pedestrian bicycle amenities. There was a couple of discussions about, was it possible to build another freeway on-ramp or off-ramp onto LK Wood? No, there isn't. I'm just going to tell you there isn't a possibility of that. It was noted about the speed and impacts to LK Wood Boulevard for people, California Avenue, probably LK Wood Boulevard as well too, getting out of the traffic. I said we're already kind of into a development project list, regardless of any project here, looking at California Avenue, starting with radar feedback signs, and typically would progress to some type of a small circle or something, basically to make cars have to move left and right at the intersection. And then ultimately we would look at if there were some volume condition, a warrant per se, that would make it so it'd be possible to put in a three-way stop there. That would not be our desire. I'm going to tell you, we're not a city about stopping. If we can avoid it, we don't want to stop. It's a waste of energy, it's a waste of time, especially when there aren't cars there with you. So that's a multi-pronged attack, but then getting down to really what were identified in the traffic impact study for the 6 projects in this area, not historically, that have been brought up in this area. We have and for those of you that were here, I tried doing a quick drawing here. We just got this drawing out today as far as what our proposed improvements are for right now. And really what it is at the Sunset LK Wood intersection is a channelization project, predominantly for the safety of bicycles and pedestrians. It's really a raised concrete protection barriers here for people going, this would be going eastbound, or I should kind of turn it this way so it's oriented that way. Eastbound in a protected channelized enclosure here, a left turn movement for people on LK Wood Boulevard here, really no change for the people southbound on LK Wood Boulevard. Humboldt State has approved at this point the installation of a left turn pocket, predominantly related for delays on LK Wood here. And we would add additional lighting in here as well too. That's not located in here, but pedestrian scale lighting is what I'll tell you here, just because we want to make sure that if somebody's walking through this intersection, we want to have plenty of light on them.
What's pedestrian scale lighting?
Pedestrian scale lighting is typically not a 35-foot curb, right? It's going to be more down on the 17 to 20-foot level, so that the focus of the light is on a person walking through the intersection here. It could even include some bollard-type lighting, and definitely some reflectors along here. But we would likely put it up in this corner here, and then we'd probably look at, there is a light, I believe, at this intersection. I didn't check that. There's one over here, I know for sure, but something that would basically illuminate for anybody crossing through these 3 crossings.
Could you put that online so we could see it?
I think so.
Before the meeting next week?
Yes, I will talk to the people that can make things like that happen.
Thank you.
And I assume, are we going to have all this online somewhere? As long as there's a place to put it, we'll do it. And that's what I didn't know, if this is going to be online or not. If there's a place to put it, I'll find somebody to put it up there. So additionally, there were, need more lights all the way across the pedestrian bridge. What I'm assuming they're talking about is on the Sunset over here, and here, and then additionally down here. This is a project we've been working on for, I'm not going to tell you how many years. It's been a problem. This will be done this next year. Okay, we're going to be doing that. And I'm not going to promise you that it's going to be super great, unfortunately. Because on the 17th Street overcrossing, the pedestrian overcrossing there, we don't own the bridge. We're responsible for maintaining it. It's a state-owned bridge. We're going to do the best thing we can there, but it will be better lit and hopefully more vandal-proof. It will be more vandal-proof and it will be better lit. Okay. All right. The pedestrian crossing signs and push lights, yes, that's something definitely we'll look at. That's one of our kind of pronged approaches in getting into making a separate crossing. If you have a pet activated, because you're looking, 8 different ways when you're entering all these intersections. It's kind of like one of these, and if there's at least a blinking light, kind of noting that there's a person crossing in this, or a child, or whatever, that's always a good way to go. And it's a relatively cost-effective method, at least of notifying, hey, somebody's in the crosswalk, really look.
Are you talking about like what's on Samoa?
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
What's that thing called?
a pedestrian-activated crossing beacon. Briefly talked about the roundabout is proposed down here, and it's in relation to all the developments going here. So that one, Alliance in Stromberg, I didn't have this talk, but we're going to be doing a flashing beacon here, a pedestrian-activated flashing beacon. Good segue. The connection the other two is where they're going to shop. Yes, there will still be the trail here. There is a, I'll get technical, there's a sidewalk along Maple down to here. It's in poor condition, so doing ramp improvements, sidewalk infill, looking for trips and slips. So, but then they'd still be, making that connection, and then additionally with how the other aspects of the project come on, the family side or non-student side or whatever, the families with students. The access into James Creek Meadows, access around the trail, walking here, access over to a shopping area here within a safe walking distance, access generally to the west side. There.
Hey, Debbie.
Yes, I think that's it. Is there anything else I missed here? Somebody else want to get some?
Just to quickly revisit the stop sign at Alliance and Stromberg, you said there would be a pedestrian-activated traffic crossing thing there, but the stop sign issue was for actually people trying to make a left turn out onto Alliance from Stromberg, which is getting harder and harder to do as traffic increases on Alliance. And as traffic increases even more on Alliance in these various housing developments, making a left turn from Stromberg onto Alliance is getting increasingly difficult, so you would need a stop sign. We're talking about a stop sign not to protect pedestrians, although that would help too, but to make it so that people can turn left on Stromberg onto Alliance without having to sit there for 5 minutes.
So that could be something we want to consider regardless of any development. If you're seeing that, you're having excessive delays, we need to do a warrant. We'll need to count it and see what it is. And if it meets a warrant, then yes, it would be qualified for a 4-way stop. Okay.
And about the same intersection, I can't believe I'm suggesting this, but a speed trap would probably net the city quite a few thousand.
Speed traps are illegal in the state of California.
I mean, people drive 40 miles an hour to 25 right there, and you're trying to turn left, and it can be terrifying. And I drive it 3 times a day sometimes. Unfortunately, I wish I drove less.
Okay, well, once we have a statewide policy for traffic enforcement via cameras, we'll see. But I'm going to tell you, this is 25 years away. But yes, I'll take in with due respect. Okay, so it may be a multi-stop. We can call the police. Call the police, say, hey, somebody's driving 40 miles an hour, can you please go down here and look at it? If it's a characteristic person, regular routine vehicle that you see certain times, the more information you can give them, the better they'll have a chance of catching somebody like that. Yes, sir.
How about one of those traffic humps?
It's not
They
going
have
to
an
be
LK Wood. Slow it down.
We're very likely not. We have, the council adopted a policy for where we're allowed to use those type of devices. It's a truck route. It has too high of a volume. There are a multitude, there's a narrow band that we can fit it into, and a designated truck route like that, which LK Wood is, Alliance,
So
Spear.
speed isn't one of the criteria.
Speed is certainly the criteria,
Well,
but that's not the only criteria. I'm telling you, there are other geometry features and volume features that it's not the right thing to use. We have other things to do it. So come to a transportation safety committee meeting and let us know. Third Tuesday of every month here in this room at 4:30.
Sorry to interrupt the question and answer. We're going to jump to question and answer. I want to be able to get the next steps to folks, so that if there's anybody who doesn't want to stick around for the questions, they just want to know what's coming up next, they can then leave. And then I'm going to hand the mic back to Dodie, because I think there are probably a lot more traffic questions.
Come to transportation safety committee.
Okay, so what did we do here today? What's the purpose again, and what is staff going to do with this information? What are the next steps? We've gathered all of this work that you've all done. We're going to take and digest the Post-its and translate those into text that the council can see. Again, the video from this will be on our website, archived in the same area that I believe that our meetings are archived, so that the council can see this, and so that you can go back and refresh your memory on it as well. We'll take all this information and bring that to the council by February 6th. So the council has scheduled a meeting on February 6th to take under consideration whether they want to continue the hearing process for the village project. Many of you know that the applicant and staff and a couple of the council members have been in discussion about how this or what the requirements for a project that would come back to the city would need to look like in order for them to reconsider it. This is the applicant's first release this Tuesday of what that looks like for them. They haven't had an opportunity yet to present it to the council, to talk to the council about the reasons why, to address the questions that you have. Part of the purpose for this meeting is to try and get the questions out on the table and see what should we be focusing on as we move into this next council meeting. So I want to encourage you all to come back on February 6th, where we'll be considering, the council will be considering whether or not to continue the discussions on this project. And you can make your concerns known. Again, I think some of the frustrations that we heard from people in the formal council setting is that I got my 3 minutes and then no one answered my question and I don't feel like I'm being heard. That was really one of the main purposes for having this formal meeting, to make sure that there was a participatory element. I know we weren't able to cover all of the topics in the same level of detail that people still have concerns about. And what I'm seeing as a broad pattern is that there are still many more concerns than there are concerns relieved. And so the council is going to hear that. Please come on the 6th, rather, and let them know directly as well. But that will be more of a formal setting. Are there questions about the process?
So they're going to decide on the 6th whether they want to talk about deciding?
They're going to decide on the 6th whether or not to continue the hearing. And in order to have a public hearing on a project that has discretionary review, that has permits and zone changes and development agreements and the like, it has to be a noticed public hearing. It has to meet certain legal thresholds, and we don't have direction yet from council to pursue that. And so that's what this meeting is about, coming up on the 6th, trying to get direction from the council whether to notice the hearing and to continue the process. Steve, I think I saw your hand.
No, yeah, I beat you guys by half a second.
Half a second?
So there's no possibility that the city council will vote to approve or deny this project next Wednesday?
Thank you for asking. There is no possibility. It is legally impossible for the city council to approve this project on Wednesday. All they will be doing is deciding whether or not to put it on an agenda. Then staff would have to notice, send out the radius mailings, we'll the publish notice in the paper. We'll blast out on our e-notifications. We'll make sure that key people who are connected to all of you know that that's happening, so that you'll find out one way or the other. If you're not already signed up for our e-notifications, go to our website. It's on the front page, top of the bar, the links bar on the first page. It says e-notifications. You follow that. You can put in your email and select the Village Housing Project, and you'll get notifications about meetings like these. Yes.
In this process, does the planning commission get to be involved at any point?
So the question is, in this process, does the planning commission get involved? The planning commission will at the very minimum review, if the council decides to move forward with the project, a consistency determination for the disposition for selling St. Louis Road to the project. The council has already received the planning commission's recommendation on the project, and the council has done deliberations, and the project has changed from what the planning commission had reviewed. It's certainly within the discretion of the city council to refer the project back to the planning commission. I think at this point in the process, there frankly isn't probably a lot of value in that. The city council is ultimately the discretionary authority for the project, and they understand what the planning commission's recommendation was. And the issues that they're working on right now are not related to the issues that the planning commission made a recommendation on in the first place. The issues that they're working on really is a response to the community needs and desires. So it's short summary. It's possible that the council will decide to send it back. There's no legal requirement that they do. Jane, did you have a question?
It's not about process. I just had one comment.
Okay, let's hold that. I just want to answer the process questions real quick.
So could you speak to how
the California Environmental Quality Act process applies here then? If it's not going to go back to council, does that mean that the lack of a recommendation, which is what I would say the planning commission did right, they didn't actually recommend or not recommend the project, that the previous CEQA document that the city would be considering it adequate if they moved forward with this project?
Okay, so just a recap, and correct me if I didn't get anything straight. Related to the environmental review, does the project need to be, to go back to the planning commission for that, or is the project that's being proposed now housed underneath that environmental work that's been done today?
Yes.
I will tell you that I have not delved deeply into this issue because I haven't had direction yet from council to review that. As I review that, I'm billing the applicant. The applicant shouldn't incur costs for something that we don't even need to know the answer to. So I can't say definitively whether or not the existing environmental report addresses all of the impacts associated with this project. I'm going to say my gut level reaction to this tells me that it probably does, that the project isn't significantly different from what was proposed before, but I haven't done the evaluation yet.
Thank you.
And to address the Planning Commission's recommendation, they actually made a recommendation that the City Council certify the environmental impact report, but deny the project. Are there any other process questions? Yes.
Do you know if there's going to be time for public comment at the City Council meeting?
There will be time for public comment at the City Council meeting. It will likely be timed as it typically is, and I don't know if the City Council will limit public comment. Those we'll have to find out at the time of the meeting, and I'll ask the mayor and see if I can send out an e-notification just to let people know what to expect.
Will they be receiving written public comment before the meeting?
Yes, so there are multiple ways that you can participate in that hearing. One is to show up and speak orally. You can also submit written comments, email, snail mail, whatever you prefer. You can, any of the comments that you've left here tonight will be passed on as much as we can verbatim to the council so they'll understand what the discussion was here. And you can also send correspondence to your council members directly. All of that gets included into the staff report and the record ultimately.
Not a process question.
Okay, I'm going to come back to Jane.
Okay.
My turn?
Your turn, finally.
Oh, boy.
Thank you for being patient.
Oh, no problem. I've learned patience over these months. Okay, here's my concern, and I think it's major and may trigger CEQA. There are 453 beds for students.
Yeah.
The apartments...
Jane, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you the microphone, but
Okay.
Before I do this, I'm going to hand over the microphone, but I want to warn you, you can't grandstand, okay? Or take control of the mic. If it's quick, make it quick.
It's quick.
I want to make sure that
It's quick.
Okay.
As I said, there are 453 beds with students. The apartments have 125 units with, if I calculated rightly, 198 bedrooms. Let's say each bedroom has 2 beds in it, conservatively, not a crib, okay? That makes 396 beds. So you add 453 student beds and 396 other beds in the apartments and you get 849. Now, this project was originally to be capped at what originally started out at 800, but the council capped it at 600. Now we have the potential for 849, probably at a minimum. We don't know. It's unknown. So I think we need to address that, and maybe it needs to be addressed in terms of lowering the 4-story buildings to 3-story and eliminating a quarter of the students. But we need to address this because it's a substantial change in the size of the population of the project. Thank you.
Thanks. Very succinct, thank you.
I appreciate that.
I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic to you too, sir.
Just a real quick question. I'm just curious if the applicant actually owns the parcel outright currently, if we know that.
I don't know. I don't know if the applicant would be willing to address that.
Sure, yeah, it's under contract, so we have, we have it under contract, as we have for the last 3 years.
So the project
It's
is,
under contract.
What
It's
does
in
that
escrow.
mean?
that means that they have a purchase and sale agreement pending, so the response, just again, so we can get this on the audio visual, was that the applicant is under contract for purchase of the property.
It does not currently own
Correct.
Yes.
We're contracted to buy.
Is it contingent upon approval?
No.
So you're gonna buy it?
It's our intention.
So James, your comments, we'll make sure that the council hears those comments. I think they're recorded in these, and we'll make sure that the council hears that as a recommendation. I believe you put that into the blue box as well.
Not yet.
Okay.
I didn't have that written down, I just figured it out.
Are there other questions, comments?
David, could you speak to the university's level of involvement in the current project and whether or not they currently continue to potentially plan a master lease of 400 proposed students for student beds, and if they are involved, what does their involvement look like, and how do we know if the university is going to ever purchase the property from the issue?
The university has no involvement in this project. There won't be any master lease, there's no affiliation, there's no agreement. They've gone on to do their own thing, and we've moved on to do this. So the university, and they'll speak for themselves, but I think they've already stated publicly that they would not proceed with a project that had an open market component to it. So we had to decide whether or not we would move forward without them, or abandon the project altogether. So we've decided to move forward without them.
Anyone else? So the question was, what accommodations does the project have for non-traditional students such as married or with children?
Yeah, so again, 3 of the buildings are what we're calling community apartments, so they're available to anybody. So.
Anyone else?
So this is a question for the applicant. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Davis.
David, I've read that your company is involved in similar projects in Davis, in that area.
Nope. Not in Davis, no. In other areas, but not Davis.
Okay, student housing, mixed housing, that type of thing.
Yeah, affordable housing, yeah.
Okay, and some of them contained a provision whereby the developer was mandated to operate a shuttle service.
We have had that condition, yeah.
Do you foresee this project allowing that to pencil out?
We were encouraged to work, and I don't know if I need a microphone.
Yeah, we do have a mic.
Hooked up here. I don't know if I- So in this case, we talked about that early on with the folks in David's planning department. And we were originally encouraged to work with the Mad River Transit. And so, that's the plan now. But, we're open to doing it otherwise if that's what the council or others, decide is best. But, so we're open to either one. So we have done shuttle, but in this case, we were encouraged to work with the transit that exists here.
Meaning funding?
Yeah, we're putting a bus stop, for instance, we're paying part of our, one of the conditions of approval is that we put in a bus stop just north of the site.
Students
And
have free
sidewalk.
buses. RIDs give us free buses, so.
There's a jack pass.
But there has to be frequent enough
Of
service for
course.
it to work. And there isn't at the moment, I don't think.
And there's a non-student housing component?
I
No.
I was just bringing
Yeah.
information up. Not everybody knows that students have free buses.
Well, would Mad River and such like that be able to have a bus?
Sorry, can I get you on the mic?
would the community bus system and everything enable like a frequent diner or frequent user card and stuff like that for student riders? Would there be like a card that the students can use on that river system and stuff like that?
Yeah, I believe the university has a Jack Pass, which allows students to ride a bus. Did I misunderstand your question?
No, I believe that
Yeah,
gets,
so
so that having the city bus or whatever, coming there, that's good for all, would be ideal.
It is, and one of the things that we've been exploring with other projects is to have larger open market projects also look at giving bus passes as parts of the lease. We haven't discussed that along with this project, but we've looked at it with other projects, and that again helps build supply for the bus routes. And the more supply there is, the more headways, the more frequent those buses run, the more convenient they'll be, the more people will be able to use them. Is there, would anybody else like to ask a general question? Happy to break down in the last 15 minutes or so into smaller groups and address any of the other issues if you still have concerns, or it's up to you guys. How do you want to? Okay, well, with that, I guess I'm going to thank you all for coming tonight. Really appreciate the feedback. If you enjoyed the food, you can thank Susan for that.
I grew the oranges at the beginning.
So thank you all, and we'll see you on Thursday.